What's up, family? This is Kristen Smallwood, and you're listening to the Thrive with Joy podcast, a special space I've created for us to come and reason together. Each week, I share life lessons and stories that challenge our perspective on how we're managing the relationships with ourselves, God, and others. I'm even inviting some special guests to help us unpack insights on how to experience lasting, harmonious bonds that abound in grace, forgiveness, and love. Let's get into it. What's up, family? Thank you for joining me back in the room for another episode. So, I'm probably going to tell my age with this story, but does anyone remember the days before cell phones? I know it feels like prehistoric times, right? Like the age of the dinosaur, because there's probably no one living in 2024 that can actually imagine their life without their cell phone. Like it has become such an essential part of our lives now that we even reference it as one of those key necessities that we have to survive. Like there's air, there's food, there's water, there's shelter, and then there's our cell phone, right? It has become a permanent part of our survival kit. It's like the American Express. You don't leave home without it. As a matter of fact, if you did leave home without it, you would probably do everything in your power to go back home and get it. Like at this point, I could be 2 hours from home and realize I forgot my cell phone. Oh, I'm turning around. Like whatever event I was headed to, I would just have to accept the fact that I'm going to be late because I have to go back and get my phone. I could be headed to the interview for my dream job. And there would be something about not having my cell phone on me that would serve as a sign that maybe this isn't really the job for me. Like, this must be the universe telling me to reconsider this position. Otherwise, why would I have forgotten my phone? And when I finally get there, if this is really the job for me, I'm expecting the hiring manager to just understand why I'm late, right? Like, surely they would have done the same thing. Like, we start making crazy decisions when we don't have our cell phone. Some of us have more security on our cell phone than we do at our house. You refuse to pay $35 a month for CPI, but you'll spend over $1,500 for an iPhone? Like, you don't want to spend the extra money to get a quality home security system or add those extra cameras around your house so you can see when intruders are lurking, but you don't have any problem enabling those advanced biometric features on your phone. In other words, you're okay with somebody breaking into your house, but they're going to have to cut your thumbs off to get into your phone. Like, when did we adopt this crazy obsession with being accessible and having access to everything and everyone at our fingertips? I grew up in an era where the only way people could reach you by phone was through your work or home landline. If you were lucky, you had the landline with the push buttons, where you could just punch in the number and it would call up the person right away. And if you weren't so lucky, you had that rotary phone where you had to stick your finger in the dial wheel and turn it to a certain distance for each number in order for the system to recognize who you were trying to call. God forbid you didn't turn the right number on the wheel and you had to hang up and start over. By the time you got the actual number dialed on that phone, you forgot what you was calling the person for. So you hope they didn't answer the phone because now you didn't have anything to say. You were so frustrated and just making the call, you didn't even want to talk anymore. Like, we were not in constant communication with people during that time. If they didn't catch you while you were home, they had to either leave a message on your answering machine, if you had one, or they had to wait until they saw you again. So if you were a kid and you got into an argument with somebody at school, if they didn't have your phone number or lived on the same street as you, they had to wait until you got back to school the next day to finish that argument. And even if they did have your phone number, most kids back then weren't crazy enough to leave some silly message on your answering machine because they knew your parents were listening. And back then, we respected other people's parents. We knew better than to play on their phones. So you had at least 24 hours before you had to be confronted with that issue again. And if the argument happened on a Friday, you had 2 whole days to reflect on that situation and consider how you would handle it when Monday hit and it was time to go back to school. But with the introduction of the cell phone, a lot of that built in processing time got eliminated because now people can reach you wherever you are at any time. The only control we really still had was that people had to have your phone number. Either you gave it to them or someone you know gave it to them, but without having your number, they still didn't have access to you outside of a face to face interaction. Now, they could send you a letter, but I mean, who had time to do that? Then comes social media. And social media completely changed the rules on how we grant and receive access to people. If you're active on a social media platform, anybody in the world can search for you and gain some level of access to you. Even if you don't accept their friend request to grant them direct access to your information, they can still send a direct message that lets you know that they're trying to communicate with you, and it's up to you as to whether or not you respond. Now, as much as we want to celebrate this new technology and how convenient it has made our lives, we have to admit that we have lost the luxury of having those communication breaks that we experienced during the day of the landline. Those moments to rest, reflect, and reconsider our thoughts before we had to re engage with the world. Now we are stuck in this constant loop of intaking and responding to information in these short spans of time. And now it's not even just with one other person. On social media, you can literally have a full blown argument with over 50,000 people across multiple continents in a matter of minutes. And because these conversations are happening so fast, we're having to force our brain to interpret, process, and react to the information in the time it takes us to type the comments on our phone and hit send. More often than not, we're finding that this is not enough time for us to navigate that thinking process effectively. And many people are finding themselves in a world of trouble because of it. Here's a perfect example of what I mean. There was this small business owner who runs his wellness business strictly online utilizing social media platforms. Now, the majority of his clientele either came to join his business by seeing him on social media or they were referred to him by someone who was already a client. So he has used platforms like Facebook and Instagram to drive his business for years. And he's been extremely successful at it, right? Mainly because his programs work and because he was offering services to clients that no other entrepreneur in his field was offering for a price that was absolutely unbeatable. There was no subscriptions, no hidden fees, no recurring membership dues. You pay the one-time program fee and you are set for life. This setup was a client's dream. Like, I pay you one time and I get access to all of your services for as long as I want. People were running to sign up for his programs. So the business starts to grow. He starts offering more services, adding products. He's getting more clients than he can service. And so naturally, he has to increase his staff to support all of these new people. More staff means more expenses because now you have to fund more salaries, provide more people with benefits, right? So, like any good business person would do, he decides he has to reevaluate his business plan to make sure that the revenue the business is bringing in will not only cover his staff expansion, but will also allow him to still make a good profit and put him in a position where he can continue to scale the business in the future. The goal is to keep growing, right? Keep getting bigger, keep helping more people. So I guess when he sat down to look at his business plan, he was like, wait a minute, this plan right here, it's not going to work anymore. It was great when I was just starting off and I was just trying to establish myself and prove that I had a valuable product to offer. But, given the way this business is growing, if I keep operating like this, I'm going to be spending more money than I'm making. Something has to change. Now, I can only assume that he never imagined that his business would grow as fast and as big as it did. And again, his business was heavily reliant on referrals. So there was a lot of dependency on his current clients to spread the word about his business and keep reeling in new people. Here's the challenge. Anytime you are depending on other people to drive attention to your business or your project or your program, you are taking a huge risk. They will do it in the beginning because they're feeding off of the excitement. They're happy for you. They may even be benefiting from what you're doing. And most people don't mind investing that kind of time and supporting you during your launch phases when you're just trying to get off the ground. They will go that extra mile to help spread the word during those initial phases where they feel like you need the most support. But once you establish yourself and they see you being successful, they'll start falling back and feel less obligated to take on that responsibility. At that point, they feel like you should have a plan in place to sustain your own business. So he realized he needed a plan B. And I'm sure he started by looking at his current roster of clients and considered the potential of earnings the company could be making if even a portion of those clients were paying a small monthly fee. He was probably like, listen, if I could just get 20% of my current clients to commit to this new plan, I could not only pay my staff, but I could keep expanding. And when new clients come in, I could start them off paying those fees and we will be golden. So he tested his theory. He launched a new program to his existing clients that charged a monthly fee, but offered a new premium that many of them had been asking for. From what I could tell, there were several people who converted to that new program, but apparently not enough for it to really meet the needs of the business. So in one dramatic move, this business owner decides to completely abandon his original business model and was now going to work to convert all of his clients to this new model that required them to sign up for a paid monthly subscription. So he starts to work on this conversion plan behind the scenes, right? Instead of communicating these upcoming changes to his clients so they could adjust and consider whether they wanted to be a part of this new plan prior to its release, he just submits a post on his social media sites, releases this video that gives very vague information about what the changes are and how they will impact his clients. And then within a week's time, he removes their access to the information for the services that he had been previously providing. Oh my God. Listen, the people hit the roof. They were livid. They could not believe that he switched up on them like that. They was like, this Jiminy Cricket, this charlatan, this con artist. I mean, they were calling him everything except what his mother had listed on his birth certificate. Like, they went in. They started talking about his staff. They were threatening to sue him for improper business practices. Like, they were beside themselves. How dare he change his business model? Who did he think he was? The owner? Now, I completely understand why the people were mad. I mean, think about it. You sign up for a service where you're promised you will have access to that service and all of its supporting components for as long as you want if you pay a one-time fee of X amount of dollars. You pay the funds with the expectation that that organization or that person is going to honor that promise. If they ever find themselves in a position where they're no longer able to honor that promise at a minimum, they owe you an explanation and an opportunity to decide how you want to move forward with that relationship before they implement the change. I think that's more than fair. Now, while the people are responding in the comments and tagging him in posts and sending DMs that I'm sure were laced with customized cuss words, I can only imagine that that man was sitting somewhere trying to smash his phone up against the wall. He had to be getting thousands and thousands of notifications and alerts about how people were responding to his latest business move. Like, his phone must have sounded like it was playing a version of Jingle Bells from all the pinging and the ringing that was probably coming from staff members who were also being harassed and verbally assaulted. Like, I'm sure he was like, where is the rotary phone when you need it? Here's where the business owner really messed up. He decides to post a response to everyone's reaction to his shift in business practices. And he starts the message off by saying, I was going to wait until the dust settled before I responded, but I can't sit here any longer and not say something. Now, to paraphrase and summarize his message, he basically tells his clients that the decision to change his business model was his to make, and that if they had put as much energy into referring new clients to the business as they did in going in on him for the change, then they wouldn't be in this predicament. He was prepared to fight any legal threats they had made, and he hoped that they would allow him to continue to provide them services. But if they didn't, he was going to be all right. Wow. Talk about cold blooded. Like, as you can imagine, the people did not respond well to his response. So I'm reading his post and I'm blown away because nothing about what he is saying represents the man we had all come to know him to be. We had come to know him to be a man of integrity and accountability who always expressed genuine care for his clients. But it was clear to me that his reaction was fueled by the people's negative reaction to the poor approach he took to trying to convert his clients to this new plan. Now, instead of de escalating the situation, he went and made it 100 times worse. And all I can think to myself was, sir, why didn't you take your own advice and just wait until the dust settled before you responded? Have you ever done that? Just been so overwhelmed by a situation that you reacted prematurely, snapped on somebody, even though you know you were the one in the wrong, or just felt like you had to say something, knowing good and well that you would end up regretting it later? Guilty, Your Honor. I've done it more times than I can count. Reacting out of sheer emotion and not taking the time to really think about what I actually needed to do. There's a word that appears in the book of Psalms in the Bible called Selah. Now, when I first started reading the Bible, I kept trying to figure out what the point of that word was because it just seemed to always appear in the middle of the verse off to itself, but didn't really seem to be connected to any of the things that were said before or after it. So after doing a little bit of digging, I came to find out that Selah is a Hebrew word that is thought to mean pause, rest, or reflect. Its purpose in the Bible text is really to encourage people to reflect on what they had just read and consider the truth of the words so they can figure out how to apply those truths in their lives and in their relationship with God. Now, if I was writing the story of that business owner's encounter with his clients, I would have definitely written in a couple selahs throughout the story to encourage him to embrace the power of space during a time of conflict. Here's what I learned about why it's so important to take a mindful pause before responding to challenging situations. The first lesson I learned was the pause gives you an opportunity to reflect on the situation more clearly so you can respond and not react. A reaction is, typically something that happens instantaneously with little to no thought before the action is completed. It's usually triggered by your instincts, right? If a squirrel comes out of nowhere and runs out in front of your car, your initial reaction might be to slam on brakes to keep from hitting it. And if you're anything like me, your next instinct might be to stretch your right arm out over the passenger seat to keep anything or anyone in that seat from flying through the window. I don't know why I do that. Like, even when no one else is in the car with me, my instinct is just to cover that space whenever I slam on brakes. It's like my brain is hardwired to protect that seat when I have to react in a moment while driving. But a response is a little more thoughtful. It requires you to think about what is happening in the moment and make a conscious decision on what action you want to take. So if I'm paying attention while I'm driving and I see the squirrel up ahead, I now have an opportunity to decide how I want to respond to it. I can speed up and try to get past it before it crosses the road. I can slow down and wait for it to cross, or I can just keep driving and let him decide his own fate, knowing very well that he may decide that he wants to die today and chooses to cross while I'm passing through. But that's what the pause does. It gives you an opportunity to not only consider all of the options, but to consider the consequences that go along with them. Like, I'm a huge fan of clarity, but clarity only comes during reflective moments. That time that you take to ask yourself honest questions and consider the answers. How did we get here? Like, what is the real issue? What role did I play in creating it? What are their complaints and are they valid? What actions can I take now to help make the situation better? And more importantly, what actions should I absolutely avoid if I don't want to make the situation worse? That business owner had the right idea when he thought about waiting to respond, but he unfortunately allowed his emotions to trigger him to react. Instead of taking the time to reflect on how his initial actions caused his clients to be so up in arms, he became defensive and lost his ability to see the situation from their point of view, which is another lesson I learned about why it is so important to take that mindful pause before you react, because it gives us a chance to reset our empathy for other people. With all of the chaos that's taking place in our world every day, it often feels like we have normalized trauma and become desensitized to each other's needs. Like, I remember when I was in high school, and I don't remember what class I was in at the time. I think it was one of my elective classes. But the teacher was showing us a video of these kids who were at the park and they were joking around with each other. Now, she had warned us before she started the video that it was going to be a bit much. She was like, I want to show you guys this video, and I'm telling you right now, it may be a little hard to watch, but we're going to talk about it after the video is over. So we really didn't know what she meant at the time, but now we were curious to see what this video was all about. So she starts the video. And about 5 minutes into the video, one of the kids makes a joke about the other kid, and everybody in the video busts out laughing. So the kid gets mad and he starts shouting, "Stop laughing at me. That's not funny." But the more he said it, the harder the kids were laughing. So the kid that's getting laughed at walks over to another part of the park. He picks up a skateboard, comes back over to the area where the kids were laughing at him, and takes the skateboard and hits the kid that makes the joke in the face with the skateboard. Everybody in the classroom gasped. Like, he hit that kid so hard that I literally jumped in my seat. And I'm like, wait, there is no way she got approval to show us this video. This cannot be a part of the standard school curriculum. So she stops the video and she says to the class, "So tell me what your initial reaction was to that video." So everyone starts telling her how they were shocked and appalled and they can't believe that happened and how they felt so bad for the kid that got hit. She said, "Great. Awesome. Those are the exact responses that I was hoping that you would give me. Now, I'm going to play the video a couple more times, and after each viewing, I want us to stop and talk about it." So she played that video 5 more times. Here's what's interesting. By the time she finished playing the video the 5th time, we had gone from being bothered and shocked by the act of violence to actually laughing at how the kid fell over the bench after he got hit. Some of my classmates had even started cheering the kid with the skateboard on, saying he should have hit the kid twice based on what he said about him. What's even crazier is that our teacher was not surprised by our change in reaction. She said, "What we had just learned in class is what happens when you lose your sensitivity for traumatic experiences. When you become so used to seeing bad things happen that you don't even have an emotional response to it anymore, you have become completely desensitized." I think that's become such a common thing in our world today, like on a big and small scale, right? We've seen so many mass shootings and terrorist attacks and nationwide traumatic moments that we don't even respond to them the same way we used to. We've become so accustomed to people acting crazy, complaining, and having these dramatic online rants that we struggle to take them seriously. So oftentimes we ignore them or dismiss their claims without considering whether or not there's any validity to what they're saying. That is why the pause is so important, because it gives us a moment to reset our sensitivities and consider the other person. What if what they're saying is true? What if I really offended them? What if I really dismissed their need because I have lost my ability to empathize? Once you've had a chance to reflect on the real issues and reset your sensitivities, now you can reconsider how you want to respond. You don't have to rely on your initial reaction anymore. Now you have more information to help you pick a better approach to the situation. This is what I love about this story about the business owner, because he did just that. A few days after his fiery post that had his clients ready to burn him at the stake, he came back with another reply that was much more aligned with who we knew him to be. He started off with an apology, taking full responsibility for not only the challenges his business was facing, but for the way he had mishandled his clients in the process of trying to address those challenges. As a means of consolation, he committed to honor his promise to his existing clients and offered them the opportunity to continue utilizing his services at no charge. For some, this turn of events was too little, too late, and they still chose to cut ties with the businessman. For others, they appreciated his restored humility and decided to stay on as loyal clients. Nobody gets it right all the time. Sometimes we are so overwhelmed by the rapid intake and output of constant information that's available to us that we don't have the mental capacity to consider the right course of action. I'm jealous of people who meditate, like those who are courageous enough to sit with their own thoughts and hear themselves out. I believe these people have found the secret to peace that the rest of us are so desperately searching for. They understand the quality and value of the ideas that take up residence in our heads. And instead of trying to drown out those ideas, they embrace them full on and use that information to inform their decisions, their choices, and their actions. Now, while we may not have all mastered the art of full on meditation, we can all learn to embrace the power of the pause. That moment where we stop to reflect, reset, and reconsider before we respond. Selah. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to share it with a friend. Post about it on social media, or feel free to leave a rating and review. And of course, follow or subscribe to the Thrive with Joy podcast on your favorite streaming platform, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, or wherever you get your podcasts, to make sure you're notified when new episodes are available. All new episodes are released on Mondays. Until next time, family, I pray that God bless you to live in peace and thrive with joy.